The area was dark, even though darkness hadn't set in yet. You couldn't see the men 3-4 feet away from them. Sparks, big as your fist, were flying across the street, just as in a blizzard. Sometimes the winds gusted up to 100 miles an hour. This fire was different from what we call a group fire. As you know, a conflagration is a fire that has burnt from building to building and block to block, uncontrolled.
The location where we're at now is like on the corner of Everett Ave and Spruce Street. And about a block and a half up the street in that general direction, to the left of the fire station, is where I live. Lived in this apartment house for the past 7 years. But I grew up here for the past 24 years in this neighborhood. As before the fire, people lived here for years, for generations, I would say, for that matter. And for the past 2 years before the fire, they were working in this neighborhood to rehabilitate some of the brick buildings and build new housing for the people that lived here. As you might have been living in a fairly, decent house, or you're living next to a junkyard. So a lot of people in the city wrote this area off. Whatever lived here was a part of the junk.
In 1800, only a toll road connected Chelsea to Boston. Chelsea was a resort, a small community of country homes. As the Industrial Revolution transformed the Northeast, Chelsea's beaches and waterfronts were bought up by manufacturers. Factories were built. In 1872, a great fire destroyed the commercial center of nearby Boston. The fire brought home the need for fire-resistant construction. As Boston rebuilt, building codes were established and enforced. Among the businesses which were hardest hit by the codes was a small but thriving trade in salvaged goods. The salvage dealers could not meet the standards set by the building codes. Forced to relocate, they went to Chelsea. Developing alongside the factories, the salvage trade bought and sold rags, paper, and scrap metal, whatever could be recycled. Many of the salvage dealers were immigrants. Starting as small peddlers, they bought and sold. As they accumulated money, they built wooden sheds to store merchandise. Since these sheds and materials were highly combustible, the salvage trade became a severe fire hazard. Chelsea welcomed the salvage dealers. In its effort to attract industry and commerce, the city was unwilling to restrict commercial practices. The dangers which the rag shops brought with them were ignored. As the factories and rag shops moved in, Chelsea's original families moved out. Chelsea became a commercial and industrial center. By 1908, it was the most thickly populated city for its size in the United States. As Chelsea boomed, its fire potential skyrocketed. The rag district grew rapidly. It was crowded with substandard construction. Businesses, homes, and factories were jammed together. Rags, paper, and other combustibles were piled everywhere. A conflagration seemed almost inevitable. On a Sunday in April 1908, Chelsea burned. The fire began in the rag district and spread rapidly. 18 people were killed. 17,000 were left homeless. Altogether, a fifth of the city was destroyed. The Great Fire of 1908 clearly demonstrated the need for building codes and inspections, for well-planned streets and zoning laws. But instead of instituting needed reforms, Chelsea launched a campaign to attract new industry to the city. 2 years after the fire, Chelsea was more congested than before. The rag district was crowded with unsafe wood-frame buildings. The rag shops flourished. Chelsea led the nation in loss of property through fire. Almost daily there were fires in the rag district. The fire department lived with the constant fear of another conflagration. During the Depression, the problem grew more severe as the city cut back on public spending. When the Depression ended and the economy geared up for World War II, these problems were not corrected. In the rag district, however, profits soared. As wartime shortages became critical, the demand for recycled goods increased. There was money to spend. Tenants purchased homes. Families bought their first cars. In 1952, the Mystic River Bridge was built, connecting Boston with its growing suburbs to the north. The bridge seized Chelsea's prime taxable land. It cut through the very center of the city. Overnight, 1,000 people were forced to relocate. Many young people moved out for good. As they moved out, the pattern of close-knit neighborhoods fell apart. Absentee ownership of homes and businesses caused property to decay. Chelsea's factories were relocated. The salvage trade declined.
This area makes up what was formerly known as the waste trade capital of the East Coast. Prior to the fire, and for many years, since 1908, this has been basically the waste trade warehouse area of the city of Chelsea. It made up the greater number of alarms for many years and increased the frequency of fire in the city of Chelsea. At one time, you could be sure of several multiple alarm fires over the weekend in this area. This section was made up of 1, 2, 3, 4-story framed metal clads, and there were heavy fire loads within the buildings. This heavy fire loading contributed to the serious spread of fire on the day of the conflagration. Every inch of space in this area was utilized for storage, especially outside the storage, tires, paper. We had two of the largest waste paper salvage plants on the East Coast, and it was not uncommon to find paper packed 3 stories and 4 stories high. These yards, there are cranes that look like they're eating at salads of metal and paper, loading this onto freight cars, this onto trucks, that's coming off. There's 15 trucks going down the street. The streets are all blocked. The racket down here, after a while you walk through, you can't even hear the noise. It's so noisy. And like in the summertime, this dust would be blowing, and papers are blowing all over the place. Gasoline vapors are just everywhere. And all it would take is for a spark to set this thing off, and boom, it's gone,
In 1962, a commission recommended an urban renewal project in the rag district to eliminate the salvage trade and create a light industrial park. A small community of people who still lived in the rag district wants to be relocated.
Yeah. The neighborhood that used to be here was a very strong neighborhood, and everybody that lived here had a sense of belonging. It was the kind of thing where someone's family owned a house, they just, passed it down in their family, from one child, say, to another.
You need a shop there, right there. Even like the store down there, and if you were kind of broke, go down there and say, Gladys, can you let us have a few groceries until Friday, payday or something? Sure. She gave to almost all of us because she knew us since, we're living here almost 12 years. She knew the neighbors, and she was awful good to them. I mean, she shared everything, our good, our bad, and everyone shared. Plays out the garden and the kids and problems. It wasn't, you're more like cousins and everything, and, more family than you were neighbors.
Of the 326 buildings in the district, only 6 were considered safe by the Commission. 302 were condemned. 41% of these buildings housed the rag shops and other businesses. By 1971, when the urban renewal project was approved, the rag district had been written off by insurance companies as a high-risk area. Because of the low water supply and heavy fire loading in the area, the fire department warned of the danger of another conflagration. It was already too late.
Sunday, October 14th, was warm and dry. Temperatures reached 70 degrees, and almost no rain had fallen for a month. Winds gusted up to 45 miles an hour. The rag district was almost deserted. It was what forestry men call a Class 5 day, extremely hazardous.
Well, on the afternoon of the fire, fortunately, I was at home, getting prepared to partake of an evening meal. When I heard Box 215 sounded, which is in a bad district, as we know, it's for fires. Almost immediately, there was successive second and third alarm sounded. I further heard on the radio before I left the house that the chief wanted all chief officers to report to the scene of the fire.
The fire broke out in the rag district. Although people stopped to watch and even photograph the fire, no alarm was sounded until 3:56. Because of the delayed alarm, a well-developed fire was already in progress when Deputy Coyne arrived at 3:58. By 4:01, it had jumped the street. It was spreading rapidly. Coyne tried to contain the fire within the 2 blocks of origin, but high winds drove it through the heavily loaded yards and buildings. To avoid being trapped in the street, Coyne was forced to withdraw his engine company. The wind pushed the fire rapidly into the heart of the rag district. Deputy Coyne attempted to set up a defense on the corner of Maple and Summer Street, but was almost immediately driven back. The fire was out of control. At 4:12, it jumped Maple Street. At 4:15, it leaped 2 blocks, forcing the firefighters back. Chief Fothergill called for mutual aid. At 4:20 p.m., 24 minutes after the first alarm had been sounded, he notified the control center that a conflagration was in progress.
All available apparatus to Chelsea.
At 4:30, the fire was raging out of control in a 5-block area. The chief ordered